Hi there, and welcome back to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we dive deep into powerful books and the brilliant minds behind them. I'm your host, Chris Dabbs, and today we're honored to welcome the Reverend Dr. Roland Zimany, a retired Lutheran minister, theologian, and author of the compelling new release, Sermons with Insight. With degrees from Princeton, Union Theological Seminary, and Duke University, and decades of service in ministry, academia, and the public sector, Dr. Zimany brings a thoughtful, scholarly, yet deeply accessible voice to Scripture and Christian life. His latest book takes us beyond the surface of familiar biblical texts, prompting us to ask, what's really going on here? Today, we'll explore some of these questions together and gain a deeper appreciation for the wisdom and insights behind his sermons. So, let's get started. Well, Dr. Zimany, thank you. Zimany, that's correct, isn't it? That's
Yes, it is.
excellent. Good. Well, listen, Dr. Zimany, thank you very much, obviously, for joining us. To begin with, can you share a little bit about your journey? Sort of the sort of things that led you into ministry and theological scholarship.
Curiosity, I guess, is the case. I spent 15 to 20 years in business and government doing things to make an organization work better.
Hmm.
And frankly, it's been long enough ago, so I don't even remember why did I decide to change. I have a feeling I wasn't getting promoted fast enough or something like that. And just
Yeah, probably.
decided to look into something that had always intrigued me since high school days. So I ended up going to Union Theological Seminary in New York to check into what that's all about. After graduating from there, I became a Lutheran minister uh, in Des Moines, Iowa. Meanwhile, going to for other education on weekends or at night. Anyway, I ended up with a PhD in religion. Uh, Oh, well, and served as a pastor of a church until it was retirement time. And now all I do is occasional substitute preaching, but otherwise I mow the lawn and keep the house in good shape.
Well, that's a good thing, right? After all those.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's amazing. I mean, you mentioned it earlier on. I mean, you've had quite an extraordinary academic path, haven't you? I mean, you studied at places like Princeton, Union, and Duke, if you don't mind.
Yes,
I
you
mean,
know.
how did studying at all those really renowned places shape the way that you approach scripture and preaching?
They made me, I want to say, they made me aware of reality as human beings could best understand it. And then I was applying that understanding of reality to what the scripture passages are saying and relating what the scripture passages are saying to what's going on in the lives of people in my congregation at the time that I was preaching them to see some relationship there, and that's why I did my preaching
Oh,
or my
right. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, literally in those universities or colleges, it's quite amazing, I guess, the kind of people that you were mixing with there. So it wouldn't necessarily always be people who follow religion, do you think? Or is that not true? Were people just as religious in that sort of education system as they are on the outside?
well, I almost want to say just as religious, which means there are a few that were very religious and others that stayed on the sidelines and showed up for Christmas and Easter, that kind of thing. Uh, so,
Of which we've got, coming up soon.
yeah, right, right.
Okay, so let's talk about the book then, because this sounds fascinating actually, because it sort of ticks a couple of boxes for me. So I'm interested in this conversation. So, Sermons with Insight, which is the book's title, invites us readers really to re-examine familiar Bible and biblical stories, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Instead of taking them literally. So, what inspired you to write this book now, and what do you hope that readers will take away from it?
Well, it is a collection of sermons, so I really wasn't just writing it now. I decided these, I thought these sermons were worthwhile. They had something, worth worth saying, and people could benefit from reading them. So I've put them together in a book, and that's what you got. A book of sermons for, different times of the church year and that kind of thing that's appropriate for some denominations. And so you got a book of sermons from me.
So it's like a collection or an anthology.
Very much a collection, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, brilliant. Well, one of the standout moments that we've seen in the book is your analysis of the gospel story where Elizabeth calls Mary the mother of my Lord. You explain how that reflects the language of the early church rather than the time of Jesus, which is, quite an interesting thing, isn't it? Because of the translations and things like that, right? So, why is it important for modern Christians to understand those historical and cultural nuances when it comes to that sort of thing?
I guess so. They're not pulled into a time frame that doesn't really exist anymore. They understand that that was that was said and done then under those circumstances, but some part at least of the scripture passage may not have, or should not be interpreted that way nowadays.
So, we're talking about different interpretations or an issue with translation, do you think?
No, I think more interpretation. Yeah, I don't think the translation changes it. Uh,
Because we've grown up with that translation, right? So
yeah,
it's not like someone did it 10 years ago or anything like that. So yeah, it's something that we've grown up with. So I see what you mean. So okay, so that's quite interesting because your sermons, I guess you looking through the book and everything else, your sermons often ask the reader or listener, I guess, to pause and reflect, almost like a classroom discussion. So, how do you see the role of questioning and critical thinking in faith? Do you think that that's an important thing? I know that some theologians and and preachers think that, whereas others think more rigidly, I guess, about the scriptures.
okay. Well, I'm not on the rigid side. So, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so, urging people to think, how it applies to them under the circumstances that they're living in, is the way I want them to go, what I want them to do.
So really, yeah, it is about critically thinking and
Yeah.
analyzing what scripture or sermon says, and then applying it to your life, is what you're saying, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
That's hey, that's good. That's good. Okay, then great. All right. So you pointed out as well that the term Lord used for Jesus was someone trying to sell you a subscription, I guess, on the phone there. So don't worry though. You point out that the term Lord used for Jesus was a Greek,
Hmm.
which is interesting, that came later on. So how can understanding the development of biblical language deepen our faith rather than challenge it? Because that is quite an interesting thing that it's a Greek thing.
Well, I guess my answer would be so either it deepens the faith or it challenges it. So, uh, I mean, if you can see a way of making the interpretation apply to a nowadays time, then there's no need to challenge what it's saying for nowadays time.
As long as you can do that, I guess, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hmm. I think that some people. I mean, I know some deeply religious people who, as I said, are pretty rigid in their thoughts and really don't critically analyze anything. And they're not taking it literally, obviously, but I mean, pretty close. And no doubt you would have come across many people who are like that, very devout, I guess.
Uh,
Yeah. But I guess, for someone else who isn't quite as devout or as knowledgeable, someone in the pews who may never have attended seminary, right?
sure.
What are some simple ways that they can approach scripture with a greater insight? Well, what's the best way to understand it, do you think?
Well, either I don't know, be alert to the possibility of interpreting it literally if it seems to apply it literally, but if it doesn't, what other figurative way can you create an interpret or how should you see it figuratively so you get a different interpretation and understand it better as a result of that kind of an interpretation rather than a literal one.
Right, right. So I guess that for some people it would be quite good to do this in a kind of group setting, like a Bible study
Yes.
class or something like that. I've had no experience of that, but have you found that that helps people, that helps the congregation sometimes, or people in the congregation?
Yes. I mean, when they hear that other people have slightly different viewpoints on the same particular topic, it gets them thinking about whether that's an appropriate thing that they should plug into or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I can guess that. That would certainly make a difference to me, I have to say. I remember having some religious education at school, and it really was interesting. I found the whole subject quite interesting because of the historical value of it, and obviously the moral compass, I guess, that you get from that. And so, looking back on your years then in ministry, how has your understanding of preaching evolved from when you first started to how the world is lately? I mean, have things changed a lot in the church in terms of the congregation?
I'm inclined, well, first of all, I'm not a pastor of a congregation anymore. Of course, I go to church, but and I don't see things changing that much at the church. That is, younger people are joining. So you get a kind of normal mix of ages, and bottom line is I don't see things changing that much.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good news then, right? I guess.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as we've come from a good place, right? So looks like we have, so that's okay. All right then. So looking back on your career and things like that, you've served, as you mentioned earlier, in both public service and academic roles, in addition to ministry. So how did that help you? How did those roles outside of ministry help you and inform your sermons? I mean, because obviously, if you're working in industry, you're dealing with all sorts of different people, I guess, and
Yeah.
everyone can learn on a day-to-day basis, can't they? But how did those help you? How did that experience help you?
Well, you've suggested an answer. I mean, it makes me aware of the way different people can be um, thinking of a particular scripture passage and then how it might apply to them. And when I understand that there's a variety of them out there, the different kinds of people apply it in different ways uh, to different people and word parts of the sermon so that it sort of hits the nail on the head for some groups, and then a later part hits the nail for the some other groups.
I think that's quite a skill, isn't it? Writing a sermon, I think, to be able to do that.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, to deal with all sorts of different audiences. Okay, so talking about that, then, I mean, is there a particular sermon or a passage in sermons with insight that holds special meaning for you? I get, but I don't know, would that be your most favorite or your favorite sermon? I mean, can you explain why that would be the case and give us an example?
Favorite sermon?
Yeah.
No,
No,
no.
everyone is just as equal as the others.
Well, some may be better than others, but in terms of having a specific one that's my favorite, I would have got to say no.
Oh, Roland, I'm upset. I thought you would have like a go-to sermon that you can pull out of the back pocket whenever you're
I
called
see.
in at the
Yeah.
minute. But no, I mean, obviously you have a range of sermons, right, which are in the book. So that's great. We can always find out. And I guess, by learning about that and for readers and listeners who may be navigating questions about their faith or struggling with doubt about faith, what words of encouragement could you give us right now so that they can try and understand really what their future journey is with faith?
But what comes to mind is the phrase "don't give up." If this isn't, if if these passages aren't making sense to you now, uh, they may be at another time because of experiences you've had that shed light on the passage in a way that you hadn't thought of before.
So we're always learning basically based
Yes.
based on our experiences, our day-to-day experiences, because every day is a school day, and because of that, Right? I get it. I get it. Okay, so what's next for you? Are there more writings or reflections that we can look forward to?
No. At age 88, I'm not diving into any particular development kind of thing.
No.
Uh,
I think you've done your bit, right? And you've helped enough people so far, and your book is hopefully going to help more people. And I think that's a good way to do that, isn't it? I
I
understand.
hope so. Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, Dr. Zimany, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, and your stories, of course, with us today. I think that your thoughtful approach to scripture invites us all to look a little deeper and to embrace faith with both heart and mind. So I think your job's done with that. So that's good. So now a message to our listeners. You can find Sermons with Insight by Roland Zimany on Amazon. Just search the title and grab your copy today. Just make sure that you do. It's a book that'll challenge, enlighten, and enrich your spiritual journey. Thanks for tuning into the BrightWord Books podcast. And, well, until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and stay inspired. See you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you for the advertising.
And that's what we're here for. And that's
Uh,
what readers want to know, Dr. Zimani. They
okay.
really do. But there we go. Thank you very much.